What's up guys, my name is Fran, also known as Mr. F, and welcome to my brand new YouTube channel, Mr. F Productions. Here on this channel, we talk all things YouTube cinematography, filmography, general cinematography and filmography, lighting gear, camera gear, and everything in between. So if you like what you hear and see, consider subscribing. Hopefully I can bring you guys some awesome content, and hopefully I can learn a thing or two, and maybe you can learn a thing or two from me as well. Okay, so for my very first video here in this YouTube channel, I wanted to give you guys my review of this guy here. This is the ROKINON 14mm f2.8 FE, that's a full frame lens for Sony E-mount cameras, specifically for vlogging. So I recently picked up this lens, and first off I want to preface this by saying I'm not an aspiring YouTube vlogger or anything along those lines, but I do run a technology YouTube channel as well, and on that channel every once in a while I go to trade shows and different venues, and sometimes delivering that content in more of a vlog style actually is a little bit better for storytelling. So there were a couple of requirements that I had when it came to picking up a vlogging lens to pair with my Sony a7 Mark III. I wanted it to be a pretty short focal length lens, and I also wanted it to be decently fast. And that's because pretty often when you're vlogging, you're in really weird lighting situations, and if you ever end up in someplace pretty dark, I wanted to make sure I could stop the lens down and still have some pretty clean video. I also wanted to make sure that the lens was a native Sony E-mount lens, so I didn't want to use any adapters for the purposes of bulk. I also required it to be a full frame lens for the same exact reason that I used in the first place. I didn't want to lose out on any light, and when you put an APS-C lens on top of a full frame camera, it goes into crop mode, and at that point you lose a lot of light. So that automatically rules out the Sony 10-18 f4. And aside from me requiring a lens to be an autofocus lens, I did also plan on flying it on a gimbal. So I wanted to make sure that the lens was not too big and heavy to fly on my really cheap gimbal, the Tech A1000. I do plan on doing a full review on this amazing gimbal, so don't forget to subscribe to check that out later on. But what that actually does is it actually rules out the native Sony 12-24 lens that pairs up with full frame cameras, and that one's about f4, so it's also kind of slow and not exactly what I was looking for. Okay, so after going over all those requirements, the ROKINON 14mm f2.8 autofocus actually seems to cover pretty much all the bases. It's pretty short, it's pretty fast, and it actually does balance on my Tech A1000 gimbal. So now that we know that the ROKINON 14mm f2.8 lens actually covers all these bases, the only thing left we actually have to do is look at some of the test footage. So over the weekend I actually went out to Bear Mountain here in New York, and I went on a little fake hiking trip with my girlfriend and a couple of friends, and I did a little fake vlog. Again, I'm not a vlogger, so forgive me for the semi-bad footage, but what I wanted you guys to actually see is the real life usability of this lens and some of the sharpness, and I'll let you guys look at some of the footage and then you can be the judge. It is a beautiful Saturday morning, I keep thinking it's Sunday, and today we're going up to Bear Mountain to check out this lens. This is the ROKINON 14mm 2.8. Okay, so we finally made it. We are here in this beautiful, wonderful lake. I don't know what this place is called. You don't want to be famous?
What's up, bro?
Oh, you recently want to be famous?
No, I'm trying to make you be famous. You're famous already.
So obviously I'm not some sort of aspiring vlogger or anything, but I did want to test out this lens, the ROKINON 14mm 2.8, in these kind of situations where maybe you want to do a vlog. I'm not sure if this is the ideal situation, but it could be. Or maybe not.
The water's so clear. Yeah.
Hold on. I got it. He's a regular.
It's professional. Yep. Good job.
Hold on. I just need to find a flat one there.
There you go. Good job. Good job. Maybe it took him just 10 tries. It's fine.
No, it was a flat rock. That's why. Sweaty as shit. But we finally made it to the top of the mountain. All right, so now we made it to the top. We're gonna go, yeah.
We're gonna go drink. Real nature, babies.
All right, so leave hiked, semi-hiked. All right, so you've seen the footage and I've seen the footage. Now let's talk about it. Overall, I'm pretty disappointed with the image quality coming out of the ROKINON 14mm f2.8 lens. Yes, it's a 14mm lens, so it's going to have a lot of lens distortion on it because it's super wide, but the distortion that it created it didn't look really good. It looked like there was some vignetting on the outsides. Now, granted, my shutter speed was all over the place because I did have my camera set to aperture priority because I wanted to make sure it stayed at f2.8, but I wanted the ISO and the shutter speed to be variable just because it's a Sony camera. I don't have a flip out screen, so I can't easily make modifications or changes to the settings. So I wanted that stuff to be on auto. And at least what the camera was able to do paired up with the lens just didn't work out really well. Now, granted, it is an f2.8 lens, so it is semi-fast, so there were situations where it did create bokeh or bokeh, whatever you want to call it, and that bokeh that it created just didn't look really good as well, so that was really disappointing. But the most disappointing part of this lens was actually the autofocus system. Often, the lens was just hunting and hunting. Now, I've had this exact same settings on my Sony a7 III paired up with my 28mm Sony native lens, the f2 lens, the really cheap kit lens, and that lens is rock solid when it comes to autofocus. But those same exact settings on the ROKINON seem to do a lot of hunting, and the autofocus system just doesn't work really well. Now, to be honest with you, this wouldn't be all bad, but considering the price tag that the ROKINON 14mm f2.8 normally carries, that $599 to $699 price tag, that's a lot of money for a lens that kinda is mediocre. I think if it retailed for about maybe $299 or something like that, I wouldn't be so disappointed. So now we can talk about what you can actually get for $600 to $700. Now, the path that I actually went to satisfy these vlogging needs that I happen to have every once in a blue moon is I picked up the Canon M50 Kit. Now, for that exact same $699, and I actually only paid $499 for my kit, I got the Canon M50 paired up with a pretty decent 15 to 55mm lens. Now, granted, it doesn't have the low light power of the Sony a7 Mark III, but it definitely is still a pretty decent camera, and it has that Canon dual pixel autofocus, which is phenomenal. And if you ever catch yourself in this exact same position where you're looking for a vlogging lens, if you do pick up the 28mm f2 and you pair it up with this guy, this is the Sony ultra wide adapter, you actually end up with a 21mm f2.8, and that isn't bad for a native Sony lens. Now, granted, 21mm isn't as wide as 14, but it still is pretty wide, and you don't have to have your arms all the way stretched out if you're going to be carrying a camera for vlogging. Alright, so that's going to wrap it up for this vlogging review of the ROKINON 14mm f2.8 lens. You guys have seen the footage. Let me know what you think about some of it in the comment section below. Maybe I messed up on my camera settings. Maybe there's something I can change to make it look a little bit better. I don't know. I'm here to learn just like you guys. But if you enjoy this type of content and you like what you hear and see, like I said before, consider subscribing. Once again, my name is Fran, aka Mr. F. Thanks so much for checking out this video. I'll see you guys on my next one.